now? So in our move to Carlsbad, we thought that, once again, if we have a meeting interesting enough for the three of us, then maybe we could get 1 or 2 people to come join us. So we're super surprised to have all you guys show up, because we really thought that only like 2 or 3 people would come and be with us. And we had 40 some odd people sign up on Meetup, and then we'll see how many people actually show up. But we're super excited you guys either made the drive or this was convenient to you and you're able to join us. So what you're joining is the beginning of our Python track, and where we're different than a normal user group is, we're going to be doing Python for, it looks like, 6 months now. So we always take November and December off, which means we'll be doing Python from now into February. So we're super surprised to have all you.
It works.
Yeah.
Audio works. It's all good.
Okay. So we're going to read the same book, we're going to be doing the same course material, we're going to be doing the same lab work, and we're going to come prepared to have like an interactive discussion on that course material or the book that we'll be reading. So the reason why we're different is we have like expectations from you, which is that you'll actually read the homework and that you'll come ready for your questions, because that's the root purpose of this group. The root purpose is that when you get to a part of the book where you're like, I don't understand what the author is saying, or the author is saying something that you've heard different things online, or you've heard different things from colleagues and you wanted to like work it out, those are the questions that we want to answer at this group. So you read, you get to a point where you're like, the author isn't making sense to me, or we want more information. You come here for the more information. So we're not going to read together, right? We're going to read on our own time and come and answer questions here every month. And we have a few rules wrapped around that we've learned from long experience. And the first one is we encourage all of those dumb questions that you don't want to ask in front of your colleagues because you're afraid to look like an idiot. Though we want those questions here, right? So every question gets asked and every question gets answered, and that's our goal. So remember what separates us from a normal group. 1, we stick with one topic for a long time. In this case, Python's going to be 6 months. 2, you have expectations. It's not just coming to listen. You actually have to read in between meetings and do the exercises and lab work. And 3, you come with your questions, and we want every question. Every single question you have, we want. Now, where Python is a little bit different is Michael Kennedy. So can we bring Michael back up?
We can, and maybe Michael can introduce himself.
You want
to introduce him?
I got Michael. So Michael Kennedy is the host of right now the most popular Python podcast called Talk Python to Me. And Michael is also the lead for Developmentor's Python track. So Developmentor is a big software development training house that both Brad, Scott, and I do training classes for. And Michael specializes in Python and is now a Python thought leader. So we told Michael about this, and we said, can you help us like figure out what we should be teaching? And Michael said, help you? I want to be a part of this. So he's broadcasting with us, and he's actually going to be kind of taking our group idea and our broadcast here as we talk and learn about Python and weaving it into his podcast. So you can listen to yourselves online if you have questions and things like that.
So in 6 months or so, you will be podcast superstars. So the idea here is really that Michael's going to lead the first 15 or 20 minutes tonight, and he's going to ask us a bunch of questions. We're going to give you some feedback. And then he's going to come back in 6 months once we finish this track, and we're going to ask a bunch of those same questions and get some feedback and figure out how much did we learn, how valuable was this, and we're going to put that all together and it's become an episode of Talk Python to Me. So we're very thankful for Michael for doing that, and if you're not already listening to Talk Python to Me, you should be, because it's an excellent Python podcast. They just had an episode with a guy from Netflix. Brilliant. Just brilliant to hear what they're doing at Netflix with Python, so I highly recommend it.
So another thing that's different about this track is, we lead different tracks, right? I tend to lead the data tracks. Brad tends to lead a lot of the UI, JS tracks, and everything else is left to Scott. Scott has volunteered to lead the Python track. So I don't know if you've ever been in a track that Scott has led before, but Scott does a great job, and we're super excited that Scott has volunteered his time to lead the track.
There's a few more chairs sprinkled throughout if you want to squeeze in, or people can maybe tighten up a little bit. That's some people in.
Yeah, in the front.
There's a couple in the front, and there's a couple of people can slide over maybe.
Yep. Okay, the last thing is, we understand that if you have questions, you can't wait the month. Like if you start reading tonight and you have a question, we have a meetup discussion that is very active, So just go on Meetup, go to the discussions tab. You can ask any question there, and we've had like good results with people answering each other's questions in the group, and if nobody answers, then we step in and answer. So be active online, be active on Meetup, and talk, and hopefully this is a group where we kind of build a community.
And we'll see actually another way that we can do that in this track that's sort of different than we have done in the past.
Nice.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It's over to Michael, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, Michael, why don't you give us a quick little intro of yourself? I mean, I think we got it that you're the Python expert.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, guys. I can't really see you, so I'm going to assume you're super excited out there. Brad, Scott, thanks for letting me be part of this project of yours. This sounds really awesome. As you may know, I'm dialed in or wired in from Portland, Oregon, but I lived in San Diego for 9 years, so I'm there with you in spirit, let's say. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to go through and learn a bunch of Python ideas, learn how to build web applications in Python, how to build data science sort of applications and visualizations in Python, which is one of the biggest, fastest growing areas of Python usage. And what we're going to try to do with my involvement, at least in the podcast part of it, is I'm going to kind of put together a story of here's a bunch of people coming together who probably, I'm assuming, don't have a ton of Python experience, maybe some exposure, but not a ton of it. And I'm going to talk to you at the beginning and ask you some questions and show you some ideas. And then I'll come back in 6 months and ask you how it went, see how your thoughts are about Python then. So it's going to kind of be a before and after thing, and I think it's going to be really interesting. So thanks for being part of it.
Awesome. Okay.
Questions?
So yeah. So I think maybe we'll just roll into the list of questions you have. Unless anybody has any general questions about TIG prior to, aside from Python, does anybody have general questions about the group or about TIG? We see a lot of new faces, so we love it. So
I see some old faces as well.
Some old faces too. Very nice.
Some of you guys are ancient.
Young faces. You've just been here a lot. That's what he meant. All right, let's dive into it, Michael. Let's go through your list of questions. We'll get some feedback from everybody out there.
Awesome. So I would like to just start by getting a sense of how many of you guys are .NET developers, and that might seem like an odd question coming to a Python 6-month track, but I know the history of this group is very .NET focused.
I would say the majority of the group here has got their hands up with their .NET.
Everyone's got their hand up. Thank you. Yeah, you're gonna have to communicate. I need like the reverse of
something odd.
Yeah, something. I'm gonna say at least 50% are considered .NET.
At least 50%. Okay, that's really interesting. And
0.6.
Sure. And so there's a couple of things that are interesting about learning Python, and I think to make it sort of to drive home the point that it's useful and to make you feel comfortable right away, I think it's really interesting to take the perspective of, the stuff that I know how to do really well today, how does that map over to my world? So before I ask you some more questions, I'm going to just show you 2 pictures and get some feedback from you. Okay. I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with you guys. Is that going to work?
That'll work.
All right, I'll just share my desktop here. Okay, that's kind of funky.
Yeah.
So, I wrote a blog post over here. This was, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like this. And I was trying to think, like, what's the relative size of Python and .NET? And you guys were just talking about Meetup, and that was actually the source of my analysis, if you will. It's not scientific, but it's it does have some data behind it. And so if you look at the size of the main Python meetups and the main .NET meetups, like not the Django versus the .NET architecture, but like the main .NET for a city versus the main Python. So we come over here, and here's an interesting graph for you guys to think about for a second. So as much as .NET dominates the software development community that a lot of you guys run in, it's not the only thing out there. And look at how much more opportunity there is in Python in some of these major cities. Like, so here's New York. New York has 1,000 approximately .NET developers in the meetup, 4,500 in Python. San Francisco, disproportionately open source friendly, 1,000 again, 3,800. And if you look at Silicon Valley, Python's actually 28 times more popular there. So I think that's really interesting, that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of variety in that opportunity. One other thing I want to show you guys really quick is is this picture. So here's a list of things that, as a C# person, I think if they were taken away from you, or you had to go to another language that didn't have these things, it would really freak you out and leave you, I don't know, feeling like you've made a bad choice or you're in a place you don't want to be or something like that. So I'll just name a few off here. So like Entity Framework ORMs, or ASP.NET MVC, or anonymous types, or the super simple way you can use add reference to just grab a library and start using it. Iterators, JIT compilation, proper IDEs, link, all this kind of stuff. And what you'll see is every single one of these exists in the Python ecosystem or language or both, and it's sometimes even better than the versions of .NET that you guys are familiar with. So I think that those are two really interesting things to think about as you kind of start down this journey. Let me stop my screen sharing and go back to my video and then ask you guys some questions. Okay, so you guys are on a really big adventure here, and I think you're going to find the Python community to be very welcoming. I think you're going to find the ecosystem to be super, super rich. So just so we kind of get a baseline, show of hands, how many of you guys have some programming experience with Python? Brad or Scott, you have to interpret this for me.
We got
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay, so about a quarter. Okay, that's cool. So now it comes to sort of the participation part. I'm going to just ask you guys a couple of questions, and for each question, maybe one or two people just shout out an answer. And when you do, please say your name. If you want, you can say your Twitter handle, and then answer it so we can kind of give you a little credit. So why are you guys here tonight? Like, why do you want to learn Python? Why is this so interesting that you're willing to spend 6 months digging into this?
Raise your hand, I'll call.
not all at once though.
Will?
I actually want to get into roguelike development, and there's a lot of roguelike libraries that are supported through Python.
Okay, so did you hear that, Michael? Rogue.
I did. What was rogue something? Sorry.
Roguelikes.
Roguelikes.
No, rogue, like a thief. Roguelikes.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's cool. Yeah, very nice. Maybe one other person.
Yeah,
Why are
right.
you guys here?
My boss is a Python guy.
Your boss is a Python guy. Okay. What was
That is a good. That is a good career move, indeed.
Melissa's boss is a Python guy. So okay, so career move. Got it. Love it. Right about right in front of you.
My name's Aaron. Kind of the same thing, a little peer pressure. Like everyone from my office is here. So.
And they made you sit in front too. That's brutal. Okay. Right on. In the back, somebody in the back. Bachelor.
Yeah, I work at a biotech company, and so all the bioinformaticists are huge Python guys, and I don't know a single bit.
Okay. Bioinformatics and stuff. Okay, so it's in your.
Yeah. Yeah. What you guys are going to see is that one of the biggest areas of Python where it doesn't just compete, but it really leads the way among other technologies is in data science, computational science, and visualization. And so I'm sure it's things like IPython, NumPy, that kind of stuff that they're using.
Couple more. Right in front. What's your name?
My name is Richard, and I am very interested in learning on how to program in CSS and coding.
Okay.
So that's why I'm here.
So you're learning how to code, how to code in general. Python is a good first language. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much, I want to make this into my new career.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
Awesome.
Anybody in the back?
Nick.
Nick.
I've been working as a .NET developer for 12 years, and I just took a job for Python, doing Python.
Okay.
So I haven't worked on Python in like 4 or 5 years, so I kind of want to.
Okay. .NET developer switch careers to Python.
Nick lied in a job interview.
Right.
That's now on YouTube.
Got it.
Now, actually, I'm in the same boat. You know, I used to use Python. It was even longer for me, like 6 years ago, and since then I haven't touched it very much, and I'm getting back into it now. So.
I have a reason.
That was Scott Reed. Ike.
Excellent.
I think actually Python is a pretty language to read, and I'm saying that legitimately. I've read a lot of languages, and when I see Python, I think it's written nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's a beautiful language.
Okay. Let's take one or two more down in front. In your name?
Eric.
Eric.
I have a very large web app, so over 2,000 web pages, in a language is killed. They have now VFP, Visual Fox Pro. For the last 2 years, I'm looking at thinking to switch to PHP, but I'm not convinced that's the right move to do.
I have a comment about PHP, by the way, guys.
What did you say, Michael?
You have an accurate moral compass.
Wait, Michael, what did you say?
Well, I'm just gonna say I have a comment about the PHP thing. The TIOBE, TIOBE index for the most popular languages just came out today. There's a new version or a new set of data that just came out today. And they let you graph all these various systems, these various languages and their popularity in terms of like basically usage, right? And PHP is on a very sharp downward trend. So I try to not bet my projects or my company or my career on things going super straight down. So I would check out that TOB index. On the other hand, C# went up a little bit. That was cool for you guys. And Python went up like 3 points. So C# is number 4, Python is number 5, and they're both on a recent upward trend. So
very cool.
I saw also that isn't there a Python compiler now, Nuki or something like that? There's a native compiler, not just a JIT compiler.
There are many, many different runtimes, if you will, to use the .NET term. There's a interpreted version, which is the main one, known as CPython. But there's also one that's more like .NET called PyPy, PyPy, because it's a Python implementation written in Python that is JIT compilation and garbage collected. There's sort of an ahead-of-time compilation type thing with something called MicroPython for micro devices. There's a whole wide variety. There's also IronPython, which runs on .NET, for example.
Yeah, very cool. Okay.
Next question?
Next question.
All right, next question. How many of you guys are here thinking about Python? Like I said, my assumption is a lot of you are .NET Microsoft folks. How many of you are here to sort of say, I've made a decision to break out of the Microsoft Windows sort of lock-in? Not in the negative way, but there's all these other platforms. I'd like to work on Linux. I'd like to work on Mac. And how much of that sort of open cross-platform bit of Python is interesting and part of your main motivation?
So trying to get cross-platform. 1. Really?
1. 2. Okay, very interesting.
3, 4.
Plus Jim.
Plus Jim.
Yeah.
4 plus Jim.
Yeah.
4 plus Jim. Okay. Awesome. So you guys don't have too much experience with Python. So I'd like to kind of get a sense of what is your perception of this language? What is your perception?
Have you heard about it? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Well, more like, is this just a scripting language? What do you think Python is used for? What do you think you could build with Python? That kind of stuff.
All right. Volunteers again?
Force science.
No, I think it is scientific language, and you can program a lot of application in machine learning and continuum analysis and things like that. So, and it's slick actually compared to C#, which has a lot of feature and very big. I think that Python is very focused, and you can use very small amount of feature, and your programs could be smaller for the same type of features.
Excellent.
Cool.
That's a good answer. What else?
Anybody else?
Yeah.
How about in the back?
Oh, sorry.
Someone in the back, and then we'll come back. Excellent documentation.
Excellent documentation.
Their developer network.
Okay. Cool. And your name?
Michael, did you hear that?
That was kind of quiet, but I heard excellent documentation.
Compared to NPN, he thinks it's better.
Yeah, I would say that may be true. It's interesting to note that the ASP.NET team, as you know, like those guys are going all in on open source. They're all moving to GitHub, all that kind of stuff. They recently moved over to the documentation system, Read the Docs, that is pretty much the default one for Python. So ASP.NET documentation is now moved to where Python has been the whole time. So that's also kind of funny.
Yes, in the front.
Clean syntax. Thank you.
Yeah.
Clean syntax, but 2 or 3 years ago, I almost went to Python, but when Python 3 was coming out, I heard there was no backward compatibility, and that basically stopped me in my tracks.
We will definitely talk about that later on tonight. Okay. So he had said the clean syntax.
Yeah, clean syntax is really interesting. You will find, for those of you that come from a C-based language, C#, C++, Java, JavaScript, you will be freaked out by this language for about 2 hours of the typing time, right? Not the looking at time, but like as you're actually writing, you're like, wow, this is crazy, because you don't have like curly braces to separate, to define like functions. You just use indentation and white space. Same thing for if statements and while loops and classes and methods and all that kind of stuff. And it really takes some getting used to, but after doing it for like a week, it'll be painful actually to go back to C# or C++ with all the extra stuff that's not there. So the clean syntax is really a selling point, but it takes a little bit. So just do sort of a suspension of disbelief for the first few hours while you're getting used to it.
Cool. There's a sorry. I just want to make sure we're keeping up with the comments on the YouTube stream.
Sorry about that, Brad.
No worries. It looks like some people are saying Linux. Jeff says he wants to do Linux, and Russia says I don't do Windows. Good for scientific work. Just makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. I think the Linux point is interesting. If you go look at the pricing for EC2, the pricing for the Linux machines is half price for the Windows machines.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to go put something on the cloud, you may be able to do it cheaper. And just all like the sort of DevOps type stuff, Docker, Chef, Puppet, that's more accessible in Linux. Is really cool. All right, so those are like kind of the positives I was asking for. What about the negatives? Like, what are your apprehensions? Like, I'm really going to dislike X, or I really don't know about how this is going to go.
Yeah. So my name is Mike, and I've been kind of curious about Ruby over the last few years, and Python syntax is kind of similar. When you look at the two, they look similar, but part of the things that kind of dissuade me from Ruby world is the volume of the different gems that you just need to know about, or you need to dig and find out about, and then the backward compatibility when they come out with new versions of gems, and how does Python compare to that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting problem. I don't do a ton of Ruby, so it's a little hard for me to speak to it, but there are many. There's something like Ruby gems or .NET NuGet packages sometimes it's called PyPy, sometimes it's called PyPI for Python Package Index, and they've got about 60,000 packages there. You do have similar problems, but I don't think I haven't run into too many sort of incompatibilities. So it's pretty solid, pretty stable, I would say.
Yeah, so I would say now that Python 3 is solidifying, they kind of culled down the number of packages, but we'll probably see it ballooning back up again. I imagine you're going to have that problem. I mean, that's going to be a problem with any sort of open source, user-contributed libraries. You're going to have a flood of libraries, and trying to determine the one to use is always going to be a thought process and not just let me click a button.
Absolutely. I would say there's like a core. There's like a core of things that are very stable. They've been around for like 5 or 10 years. Everybody uses them. If I'm going to talk to a relational database, I'm going to use SQL Alchemy. That's the Entity Framework equivalent for the .NET guys, right? Like that thing is super solid. It's more when you get into like farther out, the more niche type of stuff that you might run into issues like that.
Yeah, like some of those. Yeah.
All right. One more negative.
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Yep, Chris.
I use Python quite a bit, and one of the things that I keep running into, and I wonder if you can speak to this, is a lot of the libraries that I run into are calling C++ in the background, and it seems to make like an efficient and stable library. You actually have to then start writing native code, and this jump between paradigms is a little iffy for me.
Especially as a library author, right? Like if you're consuming it and it's tested, like who cares how it's written? But if you're writing it, that's a different story. So it's true that some libraries do depend on C, but it's not the only possibility. So the ones that are really come to mind are things like NumPy and SciPy that do tons of computational math. The optimized parts of that are written in C, right? And so that's a little tricky. However, we did talk earlier about the different runtimes or implementations, and if you look at the one called PyPy, they're about 10 times faster than the C Python one. Not stuff written in C, but the one that runs on top of the C interpreter. That's the default one. So that's a really interesting possibility if you're looking for performance that would not require you to work in these two modes.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's not the only answer, but that's definitely one of them. Yeah.
Cool. Next question.
All right. So, Brad, Scott, Ike, I'd like you guys to just talk a little bit about the materials you're going to use and what you're going to cover, so I can sort of get that into the show and what journey are these guys about to take? Can you talk about that, or am I like getting you out of order there?
This was a topic of a lot of discussion.
Yeah, we went back and forth on this for a really long time.
And we're not even sure we're right on what we decided to do, but we want you to know it wasn't done lightly.
Yeah. So what we have right now, so there's the meeting tonight, which is like episode 0, right? Python's a zero-based language. And then we have the next 2 meetings are going to be about the Python language itself. Right. And so the book we're going to be using there is Dive into Python 3. And we'll talk about why 3 versus 2 in a little bit. Oh. Well, no, I mean, okay, fine. So let me go. We talked about that one. Okay. So this is Dive into Python 3. You can find it at diveintopython3.net. You can get also available in Dead Trees. You can get that printed version as well, but it is available in HTML. The second part of the track, we're going to be talking about Python as a web programming framework. So to Eric's point, a couple of people have mentioned that. And we're going to be talking primarily about Flask, and the book that we're going to be looking at there is Flask Web Development. That's probably the biggest up in the air right now, but I think that's probably what we'll end up doing.
Is Flask a framework, by the way?
Flask is a micro MVC framework, a lightweight MVC framework. So Django is probably the one you've heard of if you've heard of Python. That's the big one, right? Flask is sort of a lighter weight, up and coming. You can think of it as like MVC versus the web forms, right? So Flask would be the newer, lighter weight way of doing something, which Django would be the way that it's been done primarily in the past, right?
And this was, Michael, this was your input, right? That you thought maybe Django wasn't the best idea for us.
I definitely think so. I mean, I sort of come from I'd like to build lighter weight, small, tight applications where I have more control over the HTML and what's going on, and craft it just so. And there's a couple of web frameworks that make that really easy. And those are Pyramid and Flask, right? There's some others like Bottle. There's actually a lot more choices in the web frameworks here than if you come from the .NET space. But these are the 2 most popular ones, I would say, and they're doing some pretty cool stuff here. It's really easy to get started. It's probably 5 lines of code to get started with Flask. It's a little bit more for Pyramid because there's some structure around it, but generally you don't have to write that. There's tools that'll like build the project for you.
Cool. So Flask does have a couple of videos that you can watch, which we'll get to later on. And then the third part of the track, we're going to be talking about Python as a scientific data analysis language. In the book there is Python for Data Analysis. If you are enterprising, you can find free copies of this online, although...
You're going to be in the podcast.
Sorry.
I'll edit you out, Scott. Don't worry.
Thank you. Anyway, so...
Wait, we need an audio break. Shh.
Okay. Then we have... let's see, what else did I want to... all that other stuff is going to come later. So that's those are the 3 parts of the talk that we're going to... of the track.
So for those of you new to Python, I think there's a lot of us that are new, you might want to look at PyCharm, which is the IDE from JetBrains.
We'll get into all that later on. Yeah. We'll talk about all that after.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely recommend PyCharm as well, but I'll let you guys get in the details. Absolutely. Okay, so let me see. Do I have any more questions for you guys? I guess, Brad, or Scott, how long are you guys planning to sort of encourage everyone to spend per week or per month? Like, how much sort of time are you spending learning this before we come back 6 months and see where everybody got to?
Yeah, that will vary, I think, by individual. But there are, I would say there's probably, if you were to print out the pages, probably about less than 100 pages, maybe 80 pages of reading material printed, although it's going to be online primarily. And then there are some exercises which it depends on the level of exposure you've had to Python and the amount of that's going to vary a lot. But
so,
let's
Michael,
say
we've been doing this group for a long time, and we found that when we started assigning 300 pages of homework, nobody did it.
That doesn't surprise me.
And when we assigned 200 pages of homework, only we did it. And then when we assigned 100 pages of homework, about half do it.
Yeah. So we're under 100.
We figure in 100 pages depending on the person. And
that's cool. And that's per month.
Right? It's usually 4 to 6, maybe
month.
8 hours a month. Yeah. But usually 4 hours a month.
Yeah.
4 hours a month. Okay. Excellent. All right. I think that's it for my questions.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool.
Very cool.
I have some parting thoughts. I mean, you guys, you're on a great adventure here. This is going to be a lot of fun. So enjoy it. There's a lot of cool stuff to learn. Python's a great community.
Yeah.
And these guys are great leaders, so enjoy it. And I'll see you in 6 months or whenever we get back.
Yeah,
awesome.
Cool.
Thanks so much,
man.
Michael.
Have fun.
Yep.
All right.
Bye. Bye.
David's going. Oh, everyone's waving. Everyone's waving.
You can't see them, but
so I can't tell you how lucky we are that he's enthusiastic about this. Like he's like one of the greatest instructors. The three of us have taken classes from this guy. Yeah. Like he's just a great guy. I'm glad to have him.
And I will think one thing that's going to be very interesting to me. So I would say make sure to think about what we just asked you. And for those of you that wrote it down, if anybody captured all the questions, it'd be great to post them to our group. I'd love everybody to be thinking about those questions he asked you so that in 6 months we can revisit them. And the things that we thought were negatives or the things that we thought were positives, we can see if we were right or not. Or maybe we solved the cross-language C to Python issue, or maybe we found out that the package thing isn't a big deal or something like that. So I think
or we hate Flask.
Yeah, or we hate Flask. Yeah, it could be we hate Flask and we prefer Django or something. Yeah, so I think that will really help in your learning too, because it's more than just here's how you do Python. What we found, one of the things that we didn't really mention that we found about this group, that a lot of people, I would say the most common comment we get after the meeting when people come, because nobody wants to talk to us during the meeting for whatever reason, after the meeting they come up to us and they say, the thing I really liked is when the three of you argued with each other about something, right? So we'll come across and Scott's gonna say something, I'm gonna go, there is no way that that's right, I would never do it like that. And then we'll spend 20 minutes screwing around trying to figure out the right way to do it, and then I'll go, okay, yeah, I guess you were right in the first place, right? And that's the best part of it.
We started doing this, we're like, well, that meeting went well, except for the hour we spent
screwing around,
yelling at each other.
And we're like, no,
later
that's
we
like
hear
that.
feedback like the best part of your meetings are when you guys are in code yelling at each other. If you like that, you should work for us.
Yeah. You should ask Scotty. All we do is yell at each other. So we will inevitably do that in this meeting and yell at each other. And I think that that's why those questions he asked you are interesting. Is in 6 months you should be yelling at yourself, going, no, I thought this was a really good idea, but this is a terrible idea. And then it'll be more than just, the syntax of Python. You'll know why you would use Python. And when, I would suspect that most of us are not going to be primarily Python devs, right? Python will be a tool in your toolkit, and you'll have to know when to use it. And just knowing the syntax, I know what a hammer looks like. That doesn't mean I know the right times to use it, right? I'll smash things when I'm not supposed to. So I think it's good to kind of go a step further and understand when to use the language.
So I'm grateful you're here. Oh, the last thing about the group, and then we can move on to more detailed things about Python is the internet's like a terrible place to learn, because one, the minute something's posted on the internet, it begins expiring. So we don't know if it's current thought or not, right? And two, there's no credibility behind, you don't know the person posting. It could just be some idiot just saying whatever he wants to say, and you don't know if now you're basing your whole app on something some idiot said.
You can read my blog.
Yeah.
I've been exposed.
Yeah. So anyway, we're grateful you're here. Hopefully you'll find value for the next 6 months.
And thank you to the 24 people that are watching us online. We can't see you, but we appreciate it. I can see that there's 24 of you. So
yeah, and they're
awesome. Yep, very good. So thanks for being here.
So just to sort of recap and hit some highlights here, and then we'll talk about why Python 2 versus 3, why it's cool for scientific, and then some of the tools we'll use for doing the labs, right? And we'll talk about how to use those and how to get started with those. Okay, so just recap.
David,
oh, sorry. Yeah, quick, David.
This is one of those stupid questions I'm supposed to ask. So.
Yeah, that's why we plant you in the group.
I'm primarily a Windows guy, and I've installed Python on my machine, and I've always thought of it as just another scripting language, but then I've seen a bunch of DevOps stuff with Linux and Hadoop, and I realized that I need some Python. So I guess I'm still not clear what Python is. And he asked what we thought it was, and then I got...
Did we get your answer there? What do you think Python is?
Well, I thought it was just another scripting...
Like Perl or something.
Scripting language for Linux, okay.
You know, it's like VB script and JavaScript in Windows. I figured Python is what the Linux people use.
I see.
That's my impression as well.
So
Okay.
maybe I'm like old or something, but like,
You
for
definitely
me,
are old.
like, and Perl definitely fit in this category of a scripting language because the thing you most wanted to do with it was like, it's kind of like batch operations, telling other programs on your system to do stuff, right? I mean, and it grew into a language that was full featured and you could build anything you want out of it. But I look at like things like Perl and Ruby, it's like that was never their primary intent, was to be the thing that ran other stuff. So while it is a dynamic language, it has a lot in common with things like Perl and Bash and stuff like that. I think it's a different category. I think it was from the start built to be an entire full-featured general programming language.
Yeah, it was a general programming language.
Yeah, and I would put...
Is it compiled?
It
could be.
It can be.
And
yeah. So remember what Michael was talking about with the different run times or whatever that it can run on, right? So there are some newer ones, experimental ones, which are ahead of time compiled, right? So that's the answer to that question would be yes.
But if you just install Python out of the box and just run Python, it's the C Python interpreter, like so it's an interpreted language.
Yeah.
I would put in my worldview of programming languages and where I throw Python, I would probably throw Python in a bucket really close to Ruby. That's kind of how I feel like. Maybe just because I feel it's syntactically similar, but it's kind of this all-encompassing programming language. It does.
I mean,
it does.
I don't know if I agree with the syntactically similar, but I agree with the dynamic.
Yeah, it's a dynamic language. I think it looks and feels similar, and the main use case that you guys probably are, I would imagine, unless you're a data scientist, the main use case that at least I was exposed to Python is Python and Django, which is Ruby and Rails, right? Python and Django's your MVC framework over Python to run a web server to do MVC web programming. That's probably the most exposure I've had with Python has been in the context of Django. And I would say almost everybody's exposure to Ruby is in the context of Rails. Right? If you go ask anyone, they go, oh, I'm a Rails developer. Well, they're actually a Ruby developer, but you're just writing Rails.
Any exposure to Rails, to Ruby outside of Rails?
Very few people have like, I mean, my experience.
Python is not like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's where it divides. Yeah, exactly.
Sure, there's definitely other major use cases for Python that Ruby just doesn't have. Ruby doesn't have a major use case.
That know nothing about Django.
Sure.
It would be interesting to talk about Flask versus Django and what keeps Flask from becoming Django.
Sure.
And I think we'll do that maybe month 3. We'll get
And I think that's why we broke it down here into what is the language, how is Python used on the web, which is one aspect, how is Python used in scientific computing, which is a whole other aspect, has nothing to do with the web, and then other places of where else can you use Python.
But it's a general purpose programming language that can run on any environment, Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever.
So is it similar to, say, like
Ruby.
Python for Linux is PowerShell for Windows?
No.
No, because you
PowerShell
can write web services.
No.
You can.
That would be more like Bash.
Bash is PowerShell is Windows Bash. That's the right way to say
it's
that.
a lot closer to being the thing that you just do to tell Windows to do things as opposed to being a full-featured.
PowerShell.
PowerShell is,
Yes,
yeah.
PowerShell is.
PowerShell is a scripting language. Python is a general purpose language.
Yes.
Are you going to also be covering data layer access and things like that?
Yeah,
Because
when we get
especially
into the Flask portion, the web portion, we'll have to talk to a database on our back end. So yes, we'll get into a little bit of that, repositories and so forth. Yep.
We're just going to be looking at web front end or API back end type stuff.
Well, because we're not going to be writing code in the browser that runs Python.
Well, I mean,
so,
I didn't mean front end, but I mean, are we looking at just general website and data access behind the scenes, or are we going to expose?
yeah, we'll be writing like server-side Python code, right? So you can still have a collection of spas or whatever as your front end, applications.
I guess I'm asking.
The answer to your question is yes.
Versus web API.
Yeah, the answer to your question is yes. We'll do both.
Well, okay, so I would ask you that question in DNX, and you would be unable to answer it, right? Because they're the same, right? And so in the Python world, they're less separated, right? Okay, so that was it for the.
I have one on the. Not so much the why 2 versus 3.
Oh well, we'll get to that later on.
But more about how dissimilar is 2 versus 3. So if you learn.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Yeah, that's on the agenda. We're at like 0 here tonight, and then we'll work our way down. Okay. In tonight we had Michael Kennedy. This is his podcast, Talk Python to Me. And you can subscribe to it, and it's the #2 tech podcast in iTunes right now.
Wow.
He's blowing up. And I will say a small plug for Kennedy. He'll put it on. Hopefully he'll get this audio slice. Here, let's get it quiet so he can fit in. If you're not supporting Talk Python to Me, please support it because he's bootstrapping it himself. He's got to pay the hosting fees himself. He just Twittered a thing of what his inbound bandwidth looks like when he posts a new episode, and it's ridiculous. Even on the cloud, it costs him a lot of money. So buy a shirt, support the podcast. It's totally worth it.
He started this podcast because his friends kept asking, "What are you doing?" Because he was a straight .NET developer for many, many years, and then he started branching out, and then he started doing Python a few years ago, and then he had all these .NET friends who were like, "What are you doing now? What are you doing now? What are you doing now?" So he starts this podcast, and I think he just announced he had 1 million downloads or something ridiculous, like huge numbers that he was not expecting.
And he does it once a week. And so he's only done 17.
And he does have a Twitter link, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
he definitely does. Mike C. Kennedy, I think it is.
Yeah, I think so. But if you go to talkpythontome.com, you'll get all the information on him. You'll get his podcast and all his information on him.
Awesome, thank you.
But and he has @TalkPython is his Twitter for the podcast.
M. Kennedy.
Yeah.
@M. Kennedy.
No, there was a Talk Python too. He's got
he's got one for the show.
Yeah, he's got one for the show. Yeah. And this one was mentioned in the beginning. This is his series, Python for .NET Developers. So if you're looking for, although he hasn't filled it out completely yet, if you're looking for a cool thing that .NET has the ability to do, and you're wanting to know about its corresponding thing in Python, this will be a great place to look, and it's getting filled in.
And we'll post these links to the discussion board, so you'll have these after. You don't need to worry about remembering all this.
Okay, so we talked about this one, dive into Python. We talked about the Flask ones. We talked about the Python for data analysis. Okay, so I think we're at why Python. And we talked about it being a general purpose programming language that is very similar to Ruby as a programming language. And one of the things that I've had exposure to both languages, and I like Python a little bit better because of some of the same reasons that were mentioned in the beginning of the show when Mike was asking the questions, the clear syntax and the readability. I find looking at Python code, I'm able to read it a little bit better than I am looking at Ruby code. I almost have to run like a parser to get the Ruby code. Yeah, I never had a problem with the white space. Yeah.
Significant white space.
Yeah, significant white space.
Yeah. So I don't know what Ruby is, but I mean, I know what Ruby is, but I've never used it.
Mhm.
But I know what Java is. So what is Python compared to Java?
Java and C# are like cousins. Python and Ruby are like cousins, but Java and C# are statically typed languages, and Python and Ruby are dynamically typed languages. So it'd be closer to JavaScript. And we all know the joke, car is to carpet as Java is to JavaScript, right? Right. They have
They live
no
on-
relation whatsoever, other than they happen to start with the same 4 letters.
They live on different sides of the tracks, as it were. C# and Java on one side, those cousins.
Yeah.
Python and Ruby live on the other side of the tracks.
So the dynamically typed aspect has advantages and disadvantages that we learned when we started doing our JavaScript tracks, right? Some of the advantages are we don't have to think about typing. Some of the disadvantages is
we don't have to think about typing.
We have some of the disadvantages.
We didn't think about typing.
We didn't think about typing. That's a disadvantage.
Statically typed languages allow us to change and get compile time errors, and dynamically typed languages have a harder time with figuring out that we changed something dramatically and picking it up before we publish it. Right?
So I found this site actually a couple of days ago, VS Chart. It's supposed to be a wiki programming language comparison type thing. And I just happened to pull up Python and Ruby side by side since they're cousins. And apparently 3/4 of the people agree with me that Python is the better language. But this gives you like a little bit of, compare and contrast. And it's all wiki edited, so, take it with a grain of salt. But they're both highly rated in terms of documentation. Somebody mentioned that earlier. They both support dynamic typing, as we said. And anyway, they're both really good languages, right? So this is a great language to learn, especially as a second language.
But you asked an interesting question. You said, why are we doing Python, right? And the real reason why we're doing it is because we have the group vote on our new topic, but it operates kind of like a reality TV show where it makes you feel really good about the process, but maybe your votes don't matter. So what we do
That's
is,
on the air, Ike.
So what we do is we take your votes and
we throw them in the
look
trash,
at what
we light them on
topics
fire.
you're interested in, and then we pick a topic off of your like top 2 or 3 that we thought was interesting, that we wanted to actually learn, because the burden is on us to like actually go way deeper and make sure we're prepared for the group. So we chose Python Large Prep because you chose Python. And then we looked at it and said, yes, we want to do what they want to do.
And to be fair, we wanted to learn Python.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Brad swayed I don't know if you guys remember that voting meeting, but Brad heavily swayed the vote. I mean, he went like campaigning person to person.
I bribed people.
He like forgot to count votes. And it was like, I'm seeing 6. I look up, really? I'm seeing 9.
Well, I don't know.
I'm sorry, I just didn't see those other 3.
I legitimately wanted to learn Python, and I mean, clearly we did the right thing, because to Ike's point earlier, we have moved this group. We skipped 2 meetings, put it in a temporary place for we totally blew away the continuity of the group for the past 4 months, and this is one of the biggest groups we've had in a while. So clearly we did something right in that Python is interesting to get everybody up here. So I think we're down the right path.
Yeah. So several people brought up in the discussion with Mike, 2 versus 3, and there's this hesitancy across the industry. I don't know if I want to move to Python 3. I'm already a Python programmer maybe, or I'm starting to write a new application. Should I use 2 or 3, right? And that's the question that everybody has. So for those of you who don't know, there were a number of breaking changes that were made to the language between 2 and 3. The biggest one is Unicode. So before a string was composed of a series of bytes, which is like ASCII, right? And now all of the strings in Python 3 are Unicode, right? And so there's no longer a byte to character sort of conversion, right? And so that broke all kinds of libraries
So double
out there.
byte character sets.
Yes.
So the reason why they moved to double byte character sets is because of popularity
And internationalization.
And they're
Yeah.
needed to take care of China and Japan and Korea.
And it was a pain in the butt to deal with that stuff using,
ASCII.
Yeah,
Single
ASCII.
byte character sets means that we're doing translation terribly and
Yeah,
we're slow.
we're choosing character sets and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's just easier if everything's Unicode, and then everything can exist.
So people who do not want to move away from 2, they are not going to use Unicode.
Everybody is in. So this is one of the. I found this answer, a couple nights ago when I was looking on this, and this is awesome. This guy, I upvoted him. This was a great answer. So basically, when the core Python developers developed 3.0, they knew that they were developing they had an incompatibility in the language, and they were going to hurt a lot of people, and they were going to get a lot of mud thrown in their faces, and it was going to be a big uproar, right?
Like moving a group to Carlsbad.
Exactly, a lot like that. They basically said it's going to take us 5 years to get everybody back on board again, to where we should be. And then we'll have a great, a nicer language to deal with. And they did a lot of other things, like simplifying some syntax and moving things to functions instead of keywords, and creating new keywords in the case of the div. Yeah.
The one that I saw a lot, and this because I came from doing scientific stuff. Print.
Yeah.
Print with the parentheses.
Yeah.
That was the one that killed almost all the code that I was looking at.
So there is a script called 2 to 3. Right, which you can run, and it'll just automatically convert, 99% of your code from 2 to 3.
Which that 1% in a dynamic language is
brutal.
Terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I think in September of 2014 or something like that, we hit the 5-year mark, right? So that's what they had predicted would happen, is they would be back up within 5 years. And so we're a little bit past the 5-year mark, right? And so this is the site pi3readiness.org that officially tracks the 360 most popular by download the Python libraries and whether they support 3 yet or not. And you can see that we're at 299 out of 360, and pretty much all of the ones in the top 120 are green, other than supervisor. You can imagine that one being kind of brutal conversion. Let's see, MySQL, Graphite Web, Fabric, right? So there are some that are still not converted.
So MySQL didn't stay current?
No, well, so probably what happens is there's more than one library for doing MySQL, right? Oh, yeah. And there's a different way of doing it, right? And that's the case with most of these. There's like an alternate way that you can do.
I was making a MySQL joke, but go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, so they had some good reasons for converting, and the language is better now. And so when we were trying to choose which language to do for this track, we had a lot of debate internally as well, right? And my thought, and Kennedy agreed with me, was that if I'm starting a new program, I'm going to use the latest version of the language. I'm going to use 3, right? If I have a legacy,
production ready.
Yeah, exactly. It's been production ready for 5 years.
Unlike some other languages we could name.
Yeah.
Start with a P.
Plural.
Yeah.
So they're going to discontinue 2.7.10 at this point, or they will go?
There's no new development on Python 2. All new development is in the 3. They do patch, and so like 10 came out after 3, yes. Right? But no new development, and all of the new libraries are generally written against 3 as well. Okay.
Any news about the 4?
I think because of the backlash of 3, they said, we will try our best not to make any more backwards compatibility changes. They thought about all kinds of changes that they could have made in the 2 to 3, and they said, this is the time we're going to get all of our breaking changes in. So we're going to try and lump them all together and do them all at this one time, right? So even if there is a 4, hopefully it's a more backwards compatible 4.
I come from a language, VFP, that does backward compatible for over 20 years. So.
Yeah. And I think a lot of languages are like that, but the problem is, the world changed significantly from 1991 to 2000 and whatever it was, right, when they decided to rewrite this. When was that? 2009, right? So from 1991 when they started to 2009, Unicode came into popularity and disseminated worldwide, and they realized they really need to support this, right? And not just in a hacky library, you have to add this package, and then you have to put these translate calls all over your code. We really need to support it from the ground up, right? Okay, so we're using 3. Hopefully I made that clear. This is the Python 3 readiness.
So that you just heard 3 weeks of debate in 6 minutes, what we should do.
Can you install both of them?
Yes, you can install both of them. In fact, you can run them side by side. There's a virtual env, which I think is a package I just saw on here, which will allow you to set up a virtual environment, that's what it stands for running, so that you can deliver this to other places more easily, and basically specify that you're using 2 versus 3 and that sort of thing. You can have them running side by side.
You can see why, to make the 2 argument that we were batting around, is you're more likely to see 2, way more likely to see 2 if you've had an app for 10 years. For sure, you're going to see 2, right? So we thought, well, are we preparing you to maintain applications or write new ones? And in the end, we have this technology discussion. If you look at technology as a wave, right? You surf, like a lot about surfing is timing and making sure that you have the exact time for that to catch that wave. And if you're a little bit ahead, you won't catch, and if you're a little bit behind, you won't catch. And so we kind of judged Python 3 to be pushing on that wave at just the right time. And so a lot of it is just, maybe if we did this class a year ago, we wouldn't have made this decision.
That's true.
And maybe a year from now, you'll be like,
Of course.
If we made
Yeah.
two
Why
today,
in the
a
world
year
would they
from
have
now,
even
you'd be like,
considered
"Why did
two?"
those guys
Yeah.
Teach me two. That was so stupid, So we, I think we made the right choice on the wave.
Yes.
Another question. Thank you. You spoke about Python being multi-platform, but I think that since most of us here are from the Windows world, and when I go to PHP meetups, they always bring up, Mac and Linux and so on. Are you going to steer us away completely from the Windows world, or are you going to still?
There's no and
just don't look at this Apple logo.
That's what I was
I'll put my
wondering.
Azure
look at
sticker
that.
over.
1, 2.
Don't look at all the apples
Yeah.
behind your eyes. No, it's no. We won't steer you away from Windows.
It doesn't matter the environment that you're running under. Once you get that set up, and you can run it, the language is the same.
Irrelevant.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
I think-
Once you're up and running and you can type, PyC or whatever, you can type all the various command line things. It doesn't matter if you're on Windows or you're
I
on
do a lot of automation, ActiveX controls, and so on. So I'm kind of bound to stay in the Windows environment to be able to communicate.
Sure.
That's fine.
Yeah, there'll be no problem.
But in the future, you look at Microsoft's commitment to Linux and to the cloud, and I think that they are fighting very hard to make the platform you're on irrelevant. All you know is you're publishing to, an Azure resource. You're not maybe aware of the machine you're on.
Yeah, and I think even in the last couple of, at least the last two, probably the last 3 tracks we've done at TIG, we've pushed in a pretty platform agnostic way. I guess the one before that was Xamarin, and we did both platforms. But we've done something that if I'm presenting, I might show you it in Mac, and if Scott presents, he might show you it in Windows, and it's just going to be Python, and we're not really going to focus on. Now, to the extent that we hit something that possibly does cause a platform difference, I don't know, file path slashes or something, we'll try to point those things out, but it should be pretty minimal.
But I think we'll be writing in PyCharm for the most part, right? And so when you guys see a presentation as the track progresses and you're like, what keystroke was that made him do that? Or, oh, he just wrote this way and I've never seen anybody write that way before. You might want to learn PyCharm so you kind of get that lift.
And PyCharm is the IDE. PyCharm is the Visual Studio of Python world. But there's many options to.
Yeah.
You can author Python in
Sublime.
any number of text editors, whatever. We just prefer PyCharm.
Did you have anything else to add to that 2 to 3 before we go on to?
I have that one question though. So if you learned 3 and you had to read 2, is there much of a difference?
It's
No.
like, a Southern accent versus, people like us who don't have an accent.
It's like .NET 4.5. It's probably very similar to .NET 4.5 and .NET
Yeah,
1.1.
no, I mean it's not a syntactic change. It's not a major shift in library change.
It's a slight syntactic change in some places.
It's yeah,
like print open paren versus print quote.
But it's still print. It's not out.
Yeah,
right. Like, so it's still you're still calling print.
Wait, well, say he asked you a question, Jim. Yeah. For the people who are listening, they might not be used to your voice. So.
Okay.
This is Jim Counts, by the way. We're lucky that he's joined us on the Python track, and we are.
He was here for the.
Jim. He was, but there's
Angular.
people come and go online.
And he's now going to sing you a small song, so please listen.
No, I'm the party crasher. I think I got up there because I was late one day and I took a seat, and then I've been here ever since.
That's true. We don't. Just FYI, don't ever sit up here. You'll never leave. You will be forced to stay and mentor whatever it is we're teaching.
But I think if I recall correctly, that when I just downloaded PyCharm and opened it, it was defaulting to Python 2, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's correct.
So when I first started doing it, I was just kind of didn't really worry about it and just started learning Python.
Yeah.
And then Scott made his impassioned argument about I'm going to use Python 3 whether you like it or not.
Damn it.
And
we're on the internet. You can't cuss. There's no cussing on the internet.
So I switched my interpreter over to 3, and I really I barely noticed the difference, especially with PyCharm. It was already inserting the parens for you, right? They were optional in Python 2.
Right.
Now they're mandatory. Right. So it's not like it wasn't a huge
yeah, I think to the extent that you have an intelligent editor to author your Python with, it'll do some of those things. It'll do some of the small annoying things for you, and you won't even notice the difference.
Yeah, so in PyCharm, the one that we're using, if you go into the settings, there's a project interpreter, and that's where you flip from 3 to
And just quickly on PyCharm, which I don't think we even said, this is from the JetBrains team. If you will bring you WebStorm, ReSharper for our .NET guys. And PyCharm, they have a free community edition. You download it, that's what I'm running. I've yet to hit something where I went, darn, I wish I paid for this. So even if you have to pay for it, I think it's $50, $49. I mean, WebStorm or JetBrains has great prices on their IDEs.
Do we want to talk about that?
No.
You know, for user groups, they'll give you guys free licenses.
Yeah. We've hit that well several times. They've been great. They've been great. We've gotten a lot of stuff from them. So
there are 3 versions. One is educational version, one is community version, one is professional one. Which one should be good enough for us?
Community version.
Yeah, community version.
The free community version should be totally fine for what we're doing here. Yeah. I wouldn't install anything else.
Okay, so anything on the 2 or 3 or anything else? I'm gonna move on to like why it's good for scientific.
Just one follow for him. There is a library that he's not listening, but called
Eric. He's writing notes furiously.
Yeah.
There is a library called something like PyWin32 that lets you load COM objects and run them from Python.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes me
Yeah.
That's like this C++ problem, but to get degree. Imagine you're doing reference counters.
Cool. It's not the first word that came to my mind.
There is something pretty cool. Is that there's the guys who do Anaconda, the Anaconda distribution of Python. They make a thing where if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can run all your NumPy processing and like all your computational stuff on the GPU. Nice. So you can do some crazy performance stuff. But I've been seeing a lot of bouncing back into native code or GPU type stuff, calling external libraries for that.
Okay, so another interesting question. We said that Python and Ruby are in a similar space in the overall tree of languages. And it's weird because they came out about the same time. Maybe Ruby was like 3 or 4 years later.
93. Python was 89, I think.
No, I thought it was like Python was like right at 90 and Ruby was like 94 or something.
91, 95 I saw.
91, 95. Okay, anyway, about 4 years apart, regardless of whether it's 89 or 91.
Relatively.
Right? Yeah, they're pretty close in terms of in terms of languages, I guess. They came out about the same time. And so this person was asking a question, why is Python used for high performance scientific computing, but Ruby isn't?
Oh, don't scroll down to the answer. Does anybody know, for those of you that have done Python? In my mind, there's one definitive answer. So I actually don't know what he answered, so I'm interested to know.
Yeah. Well, you want to guess?
Yeah, my mind is that you can't do multi-thread programming in Ruby without killing yourself. I mean, that's basically what it is.
That's certainly a part of it.
That's basically the huge part of it. Python natively supports, your comparison chart listed it as multitasking, I think, but some level of asynchrony in Python, and Ruby, forget about it if you try to do asynchrony.
That's not why. I don't think
that to me that would be a huge reason why because you couldn't.
No. I know why
you couldn't do the scientifically computationally intensive stuff without that. And in fact, I will say that if you follow the Ruby crowd at all, you'll see that there's a huge migration of Ruby developers over to Go because asynchrony in Ruby, forget about it. It's just too impossible. So they moved to Go instead, and Go is asynchronous at its heart. Like its core function is to do asynchrony. Yes. Yeah.
I go to the North County Full Stack meetup, which I bet many of them go here too, and they spoke about Ruby. It's very interesting to speak about many different languages, so maybe you can speak to them to go present to them too. But the approach is that Ruby is really pretty to write in, but it's really slow.
Yeah, they do a lot of Ruby there. I've been to a couple of their, they do a lot of Ruby at their company, and they do a lot of Ruby talks.
Pretty to write in. I would almost say it's more compact, right? Which I don't know if that's what you're saying. It's pretty to write in, right? It enables you to write more compact expressions. But I think the more compact you make it, actually, it makes it a little bit harder to read.
Yeah,
I think
right.
I think a lot of people that say Ruby, and I think the people that say Python is pretty to write in, it's that the ceremony of a C# or a Java is gone. The curly braces, the parens, the stuff that is just goop that you just have to type, but really it adds nothing to the understanding of the English you type. That's why people say it's pretty to write. I can omit a lot of the ceremony, and it just works.
This is why when we were having this discussion, we said Python is very VB to us.
That's what I said. When I read Python, I read VB.
I never said that.
Yeah. So let me clarify. I would agree with you, although you're probably the only other person I've met in the last 15 years that even knows that has done Fox Pro
There's one
anywhere
more here
recently.
today.
Yeah, one more. Yeah, cool. One more VFP guy. Yeah, so I started doing Fox Pro. That's the first professional language I programmed in was late Fox Pro. And yeah, Fox Pro is the same way. And when I read Python, I see a little bit of Fox Pro, I see a little bit of VB, in that it's terse, but it's succinct, and you read it, and it's English. And even if you came off the street and you weren't even like, I could probably show Python to my wife, and she'd probably kind of get it, and I'd show her C#, and she'd kind of go, "What are all those curly braces for? What is that hash rocket symbol? What's that?" I've lost it because of the ceremony, but I bet she could understand Python. And it could be the exact same program in both, written very simply, and she'd probably
So
get
the
it.
original question was, why did Python get used in data
Yeah, yeah. So now I
science?
want to know the
Why
actual
did
answer.
Ruby not? And I have a guess.
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's just straight dumb luck. I think like, why you know, how do STDs get spread? I don't know. You know,
Jesus,
I could explain that one to you, actually.
Minute of silence. We need to edit that one out.
Wait, audio break. We're gonna cut that out.
But my core point is like, there's a 10%.
The YouTubers know how that.
Come on. All right. There's a 10% active community that like spreads this, right? There's like, somebody said, yeah, right? Yeah. See, I think the metaphor holds up.
If you let them keep going, the metaphor does hold,
I
actually.
think it does hold up. I think you get some key professors that are pioneering data science work and modeling. These guys are like, screw Java, it takes me way too long to write in this, I need something different. They start talking online, and then pretty soon this stuff just starts snowballing, and all of a sudden we have kind of a new leading language in data science. Which, by the way, it's not true that Python leads in data science. Java leads in data science, right? And there's more data science applications written in Java than any other language. And
The JVM.
And the JVM.
Specifically, I think is what you mean.
Specifically the
Yeah,
JVM.
not Java so much as runs on the JVM.
And again, why did they use Java? Not for any rational reason, right? They just use it because they were using it in the mid-90s. Or
The popularity of the
mid-90s, and it just
JVM.
got popular.
of language.
So for your metaphor to hold up, that would mean I would get really drunk and wake up accidentally with a bunch of Python code written. Is that what you're saying? I don't think that's going to happen.
It depends on if we were drinking together.
Okay. Fair enough. Look at all this Python. There's Python everywhere.
I have certainly woken up and like, holy crap, I wrote that? But I don't think it's the same thing. I don't know. I think it breaks down at that point.
Dear Dr. Turner, how do I get this Python off?
How do I delete this Python? We're going to get an adult filter on YouTube now.
Okay. Let's bring it back.
Trying to scientific language.
So what's the real answer?
Yeah, so his answer is really around the support of Google in pushing the Python language, because it was the Python, I mean, Google was nothing but Python in the beginning, right? That's what they wrote everything in. And then because they were pushing it, and at the time where scientific computing needed to be less about high-powered machines and more about scaling out, and they saw that Google, with their language, was more about scaling out on commodity hardware, that's why people migrated to Python. And then you're right, it's like a snowball effect. Once those early adopters got onto Python, and they got a couple of key libraries out in Python, then people started building on those key libraries and publishing libraries of their own. And then it's just a giant snowball effect, you know, that is continuing. And so it's a difference in popularity growth is the answer that.
And I think I've lost it on the YouTube comments here, but Michael posted right when he signed off that it's cool to know that there's a couple of sites that are built in Python and have been since the beginning. Pinterest is built in Python. YouTube's been built in Python since the beginning. You know, that's again Google fostering it to some extent.
Netflix, he has a podcast.
Netflix has a large DevOps Python. Yeah, his podcast with the Netflix engineer is very interesting to see what Netflix is doing with Python at the scale that Netflix is dealing with. So, yeah.
Anyway, these major libraries that started the snowball effect, they're all coming out in the late 90s. And if you look at the popularity of Ruby in the late 90s, only 4 years after it had been, you know, invented, it was
zero.
A very small percentage of alpha computer geeks
It's still
and not scientific
It's
geeks.
still very, Ruby is the most geographic language I've ever seen, right? Like you just have these geographic pods of people where it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you have geographic areas, like his diagram on Python versus .NET. If you did that with Ruby, you'd see like Silicon Valley, Chicago, Australia. You would see it unchartable, like, and then, but if you looked at it in San Diego or Austin or,
But you will see also, again, like Ruby was built and lived a non-existent, meager life for 5, 7, 8 years until Rails came out. Like there was really no Ruby adoption. And that's why if you talk to a Rails developer, there are some that don't even realize that the language is called Ruby. They just go, oh, I thought I was writing Rails. And that is their only worldview of Ruby. And if you read some of the, when I was learning Ruby probably 5 or 6 years ago, I wanted to kind of get up to speed on it. It was really hard for me to find a Ruby book that wasn't a Rails book. In fact, I found two. I have 2 really good books, and it took me a long time to find really good Ruby-only books to learn. Like if I wanted to learn the language like we're about to learn Python, it's really hard to learn it outside the context of Rails. So that's also where you see the spike. And Chicago, mainly because the Rails creator is at 37 signals, and they're from Chicago. So like that's the hub that's the Ruby godhead, basically.
Okay. Good. Why 2 or 3 scientific? Last thing. Okay, exorcism. So in addition to the dive,
we are not about to do an exorcism, so don't freak out.
So normally we like to give out assignments that are in less than 100 pages, as we said. And so for this next meeting, we are asking that you read 0 through 5 in Dive into Python 3. And we'll post this on the Google group.
In case you didn't catch in the beginning, dive into Python3.net, this site that you can click and read right on this site. You don't need, you can buy the Dead Trees version if you'd like. I assume there's an EPUB, Kindle, digital
Down at the bottom,
version.
there's a
PDF.
There's a PDF on the bottom.
But you can read it right here.
Anyway, so 0 through 5 will take you into the first one, installing it. And so installing it on Microsoft Windows, and on
XP, as you
Mac,
can see from these screenshots.
Mac OS X, and on Linux, wherever the flip that is. There you are. Linux. Right? So it doesn't really matter where you install it. You can install it on any place. We are using Python 3. I mentioned that. Okay, then you're right. Basically, this is one of the things I love about this book, and this is one of the reasons why I chose it. Right. So normally I would, do some sort of hello world, and we could slowly build up to writing something useful. Screw that. I'm going to write a full-fledged Python program, and then we're going to look at it and dissect it and figure out what's going on, right? So that's the way he does things, and that's one of the reasons why I love this book rather than the, God, come on, man, keep up. I can go faster than you. That's scary. I'm a newbie. You're not. So that's a great thing. Anyway, so 1 through 5 is what we're asking. So after your first Python program, then we'll talk about data types, comprehensions. So that's like a fairly advanced topic thrown in right from the get-go because it's very Pythiomatic. What is it? That's an awesome feature. What is it called? Pythiomatic. Pythiomatic. Isn't that what they say? Idiomatic Python. Yeah. Idiomatic. Anyway. Yes, Chris.
So when going through some of this stuff in chapters 1 through 5, would you prefer that I would practice some of this stuff on Notepad++ or on the PyCharm application?
It doesn't matter. Pick your poison. I think the PyCharm application will give you, if you can get into it, keyboard shortcuts that will be above and beyond what Notepad++ will do.
I have it all pinned on my taskbar on my laptop. So.
Yeah. So if you've got the PyCharm up and running, keyboard shortcuts in PyCharm will definitely make you more productive over time.
There is a Python Code Academy course, which is similar in the topics we're covering right here. So if you feel like,
but we're doing exorcism, so let's not muddy the waters.
Too, but there's
there's a bunch of other resources, so let's focus on exorcism. That's the one we're doing, right? So the way exorcism works is you need a GitHub account. hopefully.
Which is free. If you don't already have one, you should have one.
Yeah, you should definitely have a GitHub
I'll
account.
give you one quick aside on that. We've been hiring. We are still looking actively, but we've been hiring employees, and one of the things that we look at first is code samples. And so those are the people that submitted their resume that have a GitHub account that like went to the top of our list because we at least have something to look at. So if you don't already have one, you should have one. If this is the first time you've done GitHub, you should post all of this stuff to your GitHub as you learn Python and organize it and have public code samples.
That's true. Exorcism does that for you. That's one of the nice things about this framework. So it allows you to, the way it works, let's get back in the beginning. So like Python, you have to install Exorcism, right? And like the Python, it has all of the environments, and it talks about how to install it under each environment. Once you have...
He's saying all the environments, because Exorcism has many, many languages.
Well, but it also I'm saying under Mac OS, under Windows, under Linux, right? Those are the platforms I should have used maybe, right? So you can install Exorcism on the 3 major platforms. Once you have Exorcism installed on the 3 major platforms, it, like Git, is a command line type interaction. Okay, so for example, I might come to my command line and I might say exorcism fetch, right? Which will give me the next problem set. And it says, there are no new problem sets because you haven't solved the last one, you lazy bastard. And so I say, fine, I'm ready to submit this one right now. I was just working on anagram, and you give it the Python file of the exercise, and you say submit. And then if we go here to my account, we can now see that anagram was just uploaded, right? I just uploaded that one. And so you can all examine my solution to anagram, right? But what I encourage you to do is to download the exercise, read the README, try one try on your own with no help from anyone. Publish that up. Once you've published the first one, then you can go to, let's see if I go into anagram, and there's this little binoculars over here, which is view other submissions. So within the last 48 hours, we've had, I can't count that high, sorry, a lot of submissions for the anagram program, and I can pick someone's submission and look that they did it a lot far more compactly than I did, right? And then I can say, oh, what did I not do that I should have done, or how could I have done this differently, and would it have been cleaner to do it that way, or is mine more readable even though it's a little bit more verbose, right? Like, so I can make these, that's how I learn, the right way to write.
And then do they get like voted up or down? Or
so you can, every time you put something out there, people can comment on your code. You comment it when you submit it saying, I wrote it this way because, right? You can ask for help and look for others, right? So it's very community site. And another thing is you can set up teams. So I know some of you, there are multiple people here from the same company, right? So you might choose to set up a team within your company and share and help each other, with the exercise files.
And you can submit again, right?
Yes.
So if you learn something while reading someone else's, or someone makes a helpful comment to you that's taught you something about Python, you can update your thing and then submit it again, and then go through the whole process again of people coming along, giving you comments. And
right. So now when I fetch, I have one new, I have to solve allergies. Yes.
I was going to say the also cool thing is that when you submit your second revision, you can sit there, they get links you can click on, you can see each revision on that has been submitted.
Yeah. So
it's really nice.
Let me go back to here, and I'm sure I have
different abilities within, like for your multiple submissions.
Meetup.
I don't remember it being that way, but most of the problems are small enough that you can see, you can clearly see the difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's so. Oh, this was a bad example.
And once you get familiar with the exorcism pattern, like you probably saw when he did a fetch, there was like...
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can go 1, 2, but I was trying to find one that's a little bit more here.
You probably saw from his fetch, there's a bunch of other languages that exorcism supports. You can learn Rust and Go and C# and Java. And blah,
yeah,
blah,
so here's a better example, right? Like my first iteration, I had this nastiness to try and figure out if this thing was a all uppercase thing. And then in the second one, it was like, oh, there's a function for that. Crap. And now that I know that, I can just, you know, I flipped it over, and that was my second iteration, right? Oh. Okay, that's all I was going to talk about.
Awesome.
Did you have anything? Did you have anything?
So also, while we're in this question phase, for those of you on the YouTube, there appear to be 20. Oh, someone just left. 22 of you. Feel free to post a question. Maybe I can jump on, and I can't really see the comments so well.
I've been checking.
Okay. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat there on YouTube, and we'll try to get to them. And then yeah, let's go around the room. Questions. Questions about what we're going to learn, about TIG, about whatever.
Using Exorcism, about the books.
Yes, and just we're going to attempt. So far, I think this has worked. We're going to attempt to live stream all of these. So I know it's kind of crowded in here, and we're probably at about the limit we can fit in this room. So they will be available live stream. This recording is going to be available on YouTube. So we'll post all of that so you can watch this back if you wanted to. If you forgot a link, next month will be live streamed and then instantly on YouTube.
Typically, our meetings are from 6 to 8:30 or so.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you hate the chair, you can bring it to the.
Yeah, yeah. Or if you got a better chair you want to bring in, that's totally cool. Tonight's a little bit shorter because we're just kicking it off, but next month we'll take the full time or more because I'm sure everyone's going to have questions and we're going to go over everything you learned and stuff. So.
Did we have specific exorcism?
Yes. Yeah, I just realized that I forgot to say that. So we're starting from Hello World. That'll be your first fetch, right? And we're going through Anagram, which is the one that I just completed. Skipping Gigasecond and Meetup, the two that involve dates. We haven't talked about dates yet. That's not in the reading. It's in the next month's reading. So anything that involves dates, just skip it. There's only two of those, Gigasecond and Meetup.
I didn't know how to do that in the.
Yeah. So you say exorcism skip. I think it's just exorcism skip, right? And then no, language slug. Python and then allergies. Yeah, there you go.
And how do you unskip it? Just because.
What would you guess?
Unskip. Unskip.
Good guess.
Awesome.
No.
Skip backwards.
It is. I know.
Yeah, spell skip backwards.
Hold on. I'll look at it. We'll get it.
Okay, other questions? I saw some hands popping.
That's what I thought it was too.
In the back there, what was your name? Sorry.
I'm wondering what kind of a GUI development package you would recommend?
So we recommend PyCharm. For doing UI development.
We'll talk about that one later. So it depends on the type of GUI that you're trying to show. Especially, we'll cover it in the scientific portion, right? If you're dealing with it in terms of a web UI, right? We're going to talk about that during the web portion of our track. But if you're talking about scientific visualization and display, we'll talk about those during that time as well. So it would depend on the type of GUI that you're trying to develop.
Do you have a question?
Yes. Do you actually mind showing, because I don't think people know that it's going to print out tests that are failing, and that's how you fix it.
Yeah,
you might want to.
All right.
So that they understand what they're going to see.
Sure. Now you're giving them help. We want to do the first one with no exorcism.
Oh, no help. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So when you pull down Hello World, I think this one, yeah. Okay, this is what you'll get, right? So you'll get three files here. One is hello.py, and it has nothing in it other than the function signature that you're trying to implement. The other is a test file. And this test file imports the unit test library and also imports your package, your code. And to run that in PyCharm, you say run unit tests, hello world tests, and there are three tests here, and they all three fail because you haven't written any code yet. It's a good point. Yes.
One thing that people ask me about a lot is how you can see the counts. And so if you right click on the failed tests there and say view statistics, it's actually a better view of the unit test runner.
You're saying?
So no, on the orange icons.
Okay.
So just right click.
Careful, you're going to find yourself.
Show statistics. Show
you're going to be a fourth seat up
So
there already is, actually. You could just go.
That view right there is a whole lot better than the one on the left. So just so you it's out there.
One thing I noticed, there were times when I was rerunning using this button, and it wasn't refreshed with the code that I just wrote. Right, I actually had to. Keyboard shortcut. Shift F10. Well, in my world, no, but yes, that's a good thought.
Default.
Yeah.
That's okay. So that's one other good point. If you install PyCharm and you've never used a IntelliJ-based IDE, which is what this is, you got two choices. You either assimilate and figure out all new keystrokes, or you punt and you go online and you find the person who's posted the Visual Studio ReSharper key mappings, right? So you can switch to Visual Studio key mappings, which gets you part of the way there, and then you go find not Hatan, who is it? Anyway, you go find the ReSharper mappings, and then you get most of the way there, and then you go fix a few of them yourself. So like my IntelliJ-based IDs, WebStorm, PyCharm, whatever, like it's Control-T to go to stuff. It's Control-RR to refactor, rename, Control-RV to extract variables. Like
Why isn't that on Git?
It's a good question. I should put that up on my snippets. I might do that. Because I just can't, my brain is too small. I can't remember that many different keystrokes. And like,
The other thing
I already got to compete with Control-C versus Command-C when I switch OSs, so forget about it.
JetBrains also uses themes and editor coloring, so if you like Visual Studio Blackout,
Yeah.
you can switch to a Twilight if you or some other like low.
Apple does let you switch that though.
Yeah.
Command and Control. just throwing it out
Yeah,
there.
we
That happened to me
before.
before. I had to switch back.
Yeah.
This test thing though reminds me of TKP. This.
Yeah.
Start with a failing test. Yeah, question back.
The-
Sorry, what was your name again? I'm sorry.
I'm Nick.
Nick, right.
So I've been playing with Python for now a few weeks, and I got the Python tools for Visual Studio extension.
Yep.
And now I'm like considering this PyCharm. I mean, since I have all this experience in Visual Studio, do you think it would make more sense to stay with this, or would it be better to switch?
I mean, this is JetBrains, so this is ReSharper.
Wow.
Do you use ReSharper in Visual Studio or no?
I actually don't.
Yeah. So then no. So then yeah, I think for me, if your focus is on learning the Python language, you want to get rid of the other distractions and stay in Visual Studio would be better because you'll just be comfortable. You won't stumble over a keystroke missing or where the heck is the test runner or any of that stuff. So yeah, I would say. Yeah.
Excuse me. When you go to the Flask system, is it still going to be using PyCharm?
Yes.
In Flask, are we using like any sort of templating library or anything like that, or are we just writing HTML out?
Yeah, we'll probably, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't chosen it yet. Do you have one to recommend?
No, I'm just.
If you do, you got to sit in the mentor seat.
I thought that by default,
actually, I've not
Flask
done it
used,
much more stuff.
Django templates, the same templating syntax.
Yeah, but I hate that one. Isn't that the one with the angled percent?
I think they used Angular, same thing, double mustache.
Oh, they use the mustache?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm okay with the mustaches, if that's the default.
I like the ones that lead with like Razor is really good.
Yeah.
I love Razor.
Mhm.
If there's something similar to that, that would be.
There is a Razor-like templating engine for Express and Node, so I would be shocked if there was one for Python.
Templating.
Cool. Other questions?
So with Flask, you would be able to create full CRUD websites, database types.
Well, I mean, Flask itself is just the MVC, and then you'd have to have something like Entity Framework, right?
Right.
Like talking an ORM or something like that, right?
Yeah, Flask.
But we'll cover all of that in the web portion of our track. Yes.
Flask is to Python like MVC is to .NET. Rails is to Ruby. It's the routing views. and
Rails. So Rails, I disagree. Rails is all the way. Rails is active record.
Yeah, but you don't have to. Like
Yeah.
active record is EF. Active record is to Ruby like EF is to Windows. You can
But
use active record
my
out
point
of
is,
band
if
from
you're
Rails.
using Rails as an analogy, that does cover both the web framework and the ORM.
Yeah, but it's active record, not Rails. It's not part of the Rails library.
No, Rails and active record. Rails uses active record. It is active record. There's no distinguishing that. I mean, yes, you can turn it off and use something else, but if you download Rails, it is active record. You're using active record, unless you explicitly code against it. And there's a significant amount of code to code against it. So that's
as requested and argued.
That's a pretty mild one.
Yeah, that was actually pretty.
We get better, don't worry.
To talk about the data side,
Nobody threw
the
anything yet.
project leader of DocumentDB, which is the Azure MongoDB JSON document store, he wrote a post last week titled "Build a Web Application with Python and Flask Using DocumentDB as the document store," which I read through it, and it's pretty thorough. It's Ryan, and actually Ryan could come just like Michael and be a guest to talk about
how to integrate a JSON document store with Flask if we wanted him to. He could do that, and he would probably fly in to do that because he is like huge on getting community adoption of DocumentDB right now. But the way to do it in Mongo is so similar. Like it's just a standard JSON document store URI, API.
So I see a question from the YouTube crowd there. Stu says, what should I do if I get completely stuck on an exorcism problem?
Just upload the broken one, and people will help you.
Yeah, cool. Upload the broken one. I like it.
Yep.
That is kind of the point of it, right? It's community driven. Like, help me fix my code.
I've actually gone to review ones that were totally blank.
Nice. Well, and you even showed on yours, maybe if you can pull that back up, you showed that you can go find somebody else's, right? So you can upload yours that's broken, but then you can also go see how
once you
somebody
have a submission, those binoculars, sorry, let me go back there.
Karcher says SQL Alchemy ? What does that mean?
Actually, you know what as I was talking about the data store that was just asked, freaking Michael's the Mongo man. Like he actually does all the Mongo training. So I'm sure we're covered on the data side.
Karcher says SQL Alchemy ?
Undecided.
Okay. Cool.
If you had thoughts one way or the other, send us an email. Okay, so there's the link. So I can view other submissions, and then I can see how other people solve the problem, right? It's not exactly ideal, I think it would be better if you guys can get into, teams, and that way, help each other out rather than
you just kind of like
because here you're just kind of like looking through other. It does't really tell you how to get past your particular problem. It just tells you a completely different way of solving the problem, right?
Right. Well, so I did this with F# a while back, and I had something where I just simply posted like to Twitter or whatever. But we have an active group. If you post your code on that and post a link to the
so each submission gets a GUID or whatever, so you can just post that on the.
We have one more question from YouTube here. It says, what's the link to the example project that was just mentioned? I'm not sure. I think we were just showing an exorcism thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just Exorcism.io, which Scott's got up on his screen right now. And
we should put it in the discussion.
Oh, yeah. We're gonna send out the homework anyway.
We're gonna post all this to the meeting, so you'll know what the reading is, know what the first meeting is. And I mean, I think we went over this, but the goal is that we'll have some tasks that need to be completed by the next meeting, and then the point of the next meeting will be to review what we did. And really, ideally, the point of the next meeting is to answer all the questions that you guys have run into, or maybe you answered the question already, but you kind of want another opinion on it. That's our goal would be to just sit here and listen to you all discuss for the whole time. But that doesn't always happen, so we have some materials to go through too.
And we read the discussions online as they happen too, because sometimes we're lazy typers, and so we'll look at a question like, that was a really good question. We should like spend 15 minutes and talk about the thought that went behind our answer. And we've had whole meetings where somebody wrote one question and like the meeting just became about that question.
Yeah.
So is the meetup sort of the official online discussion form now, or are you still using the Google?
I think we'd like to push towards the meetup. It just makes it easier for us, but we have a long-standing Google group that most people are part of, and
we're watching both, but we prefer the meetup.
We'd prefer to kind of wean ourselves off of Google Groups, just essential. Meetup just has better tools. Like Google Groups was cool like 7 years ago, but they just haven't touched that thing in so long.
Google Groups is that we're in Google ID hell, really. Like we have the same people signed up 8 times because they have 8 Gmails for work or whatever, and like
multiple identities is terrible.
See it, the identity issue. Google needs to fix that.
So if you could post to the meetup discussion group, that would be better. Yeah, but we are watching both, so we'll slowly wean you off. Any other questions before we shut down the broadcast? I mean, we're going to hang around after. Obviously, you can come up after, but we're going to turn off the live broadcast and shut down the YouTube. So, anything else you want on record?
What is TCL/TK in relationship?
So you'd asked about.
All right, here comes 35 more minutes.
Yeah, you had asked about a GUI framework, right? That's one of the GUI frameworks.
TCL is a GUI framework
for TickleTK.
Oh, I know.
TCL has a free.
No.
You never called it TickleTK? No. Okay, for the 23 people still hanging around YouTube, thanks for hanging out with us. The video will be posted.
This will be on YouTube, by the way, so you can watch, listen to the questions, review.
Okay, now all together, everybody say bye to the YouTubers. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Bye.